the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them up a high mountain where they could be alone by themselves. There in their presence he was transfigured. His clothes became dazzlingly white, whiter than any earthly creature could make them. Elijah appeared to them with Moses. They were talking with Jesus. And Peter spoke to Jesus. "Rabbi," he said, "it is wonderful for us to be here. So let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." They did not know what to say. They were so frightened. A cloud came covering them in shadow, and there came a voice from the cloud. "This is my Son, the Beloved. Listen to him." And suddenly, when they looked round, they saw no one with them anymore but only Jesus. As they came down the mountain, he warned them to tell no one what they had seen, until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They observed the warning faithfully, though among themselves they discussed what rising from the dead could mean. Gospel of the Lord. As if to say, well, he may be going to say things to you that are difficult, that you will not understand, you won't want to hear about, but listen to him anyway. I guess all of us have a tendency to avoid facing challenging words or situations. Sometimes we can quite literally stop listening, as in the famous hearing aid trick where you only have it selectively turned on to what you want to listen to. When people who have a knack of exposing our failings come along, when we face areas of life where we don't feel very competent, we face sickness and death itself, and indeed this very season of Lent can be like that, uncomfortable in its flavour. The suggestion that we should take up the cross. Maybe one of those things we'd rather avoid or hurry through without taking it too seriously. Like Peter in the Gospel, we'd rather stay on the mountaintop where everything is wonderful. It's good to be here. No reason to move down. It's a bit like the feeling you have when you're about to dive into a swimming pool or run into the sea, at least in England where it never gets really warm. Why not stay here where it's warm and dry and comfortable, rather than get wet and cold? And yet, of course, once you're actually in, you begin to feel very alive. That great 19th century priest, the Curé of Ars, says something similar about taking up the cross. He points out that suffering in one form or another is always going to accompany us through human life. But that there are 2 ways of suffering. She compares to the good thief who was crucified next to Jesus and entered paradise, or the bad one. We can suffer with love or without love, with bitterness and complaining. The Curé says, on the way of the cross, you see, my children, only the first step is painful. Our greatest cross is the fear of the cross. Sometimes I have to confess I wake up in the morning and think of the amount of work I have to do that day and just want to turn over and go back to sleep. I'm sure many of you have felt the same. Or there may be a particularly difficult interview or situation to deal with. I just try to find every way around it rather than actually facing it. And yet, looking back, it's astonishing how often it's just in such situations, when we do take up the cross courageously, that we find we have grown in strength and wisdom ourselves, and also experienced God's power helping us in our weakness. We may find within ourselves reserves of patience or courage we never knew were there. We may hear ourselves saying things we had no idea we were capable of saying, which seemed to hit exactly the right spot. In these and other ways, we sometimes have just a glimpse of the glory of God and the glory of human life right in the midst of our trials. But it's as if we have to get to the limit of ourselves, like Abraham in the first reading, before this is given to us. And as the disciples found, it only lasts for a moment. You can't hang on to it. But the point is we carry the memory of such times with us, and the next time we have to face some difficult situation, we can respond with more trust that God will come to our help. For all of us, the ultimate test we face is death, whether our own or that of a loved one. To see the body of someone close to us slowly disintegrating is a severe test of our faith in God and the beauty of human life itself. For the disciples, it seemed completely inconceivable that Jesus, the one in whom they had come to place all their hopes, and whose glory they had seen, could let himself be captured and submit to a cruel death. And yet, when Jesus is on the cross, the end of St. Mark's Gospel, St. Mark tells us about another voice, proclaiming that Jesus is God's Son. Not the voice of God from heaven this time, but of all things, the voice of a Roman centurion, a pagan who'd actually helped crucify him. And witnessing the way he died, exclaimed, "Truly this was the Son of God." When he rose in his glorious body, the disciples were filled with such joy and confidence that they went boldly throughout the world proclaiming him, happy to undergo all sorts of painful trials, even death itself, because they had seen the glory that awaits his followers. And we too, if we take up our daily crosses, big or small, in a generous spirit now, we will be prepared for that day when we pass through the gates of death, confident that he who did not hesitate to suffer and die for us will give us a share in the glory that here below we have begun.